see your questions and to respond to them when an opportune moment arises. My name is Evan Silbert. I'll be the host of this one. You'll see Jeffrey Egron's name on top there. Jeff has handed it off to me today, so I'll be running it. Those are the only housekeeping chores. Of course, if you need to go to the bathroom, it's on the door behind you on the left or the right or wherever you have your bathroom in your home. Chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot starts with a beautiful description of a Mussar path and ends with the reminder that we must do the work, whether we finish it or not. We will look at the middot and traits that guide the journey. Today's webinar is being produced by Elizabeth Eastman. Rabbi Meredith Cahn works as a hospital chaplain in the San Francisco Bay Area, being present with people in liminal moments of their lives, and leads groups that explore wisdom, especially Jewish wisdom in aging. She also officiates weddings and other life cycle events, and she blogs. She was a member of the first cohort of Derek HaNefesh, the Mussar Institute's rabbi-specific training program, and has continued to study and practice with that cohort for over 2 years now. She was ordained as a rabbi at the Academy for Jewish Religion in California and served as rabbi in North Lake Tahoe for 2 years before returning to the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband, Sam, doctors, and daughter, Olya, and 3 lovely little cats who may or may not appear on the screen today. At any rate, we will turn over to Rabbi Cahn, and I will get the first slide up for you.
So thank you, Ellen, and thank you everyone for being here. It's an honor to be a presenter for the Mussar Institute, and I hope we have a fruitful session here today. And so I'd just like to start with the blessing for studying, so I feel grounded. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. May the one who blessed all of us and commanded us to connect and be holy by immersing ourselves in the words of Torah. Also, I'll be stopping at various places along the way to check in with you all about questions. So I hope that you feel free to as we go along. So I'm just going to say a tiny bit more about myself than Evan so kindly said. I became a student of Mussar originally in 2006 when I started rabbinic school at the Academy for Jewish Religion. And Mussar was not just a mandatory class, but it was an underpinning of the structure of our spiritual development as rabbis, cantors, and chaplains. Alan Marinas, the founder of the Mussar Institute, came in a few times, but it was our dean and Mussar teacher, Rabbi Mel Gottlieb, who had been a practitioner of Mussar for about 50 years, since his days as a student at Yeshiva University, who really let us know how important it was. It always seemed to me he was on a different spiritual plane than I was. And over time, it became clear that that was due at least in part because that he regularly studied and practiced Mussar. So today we're exploring the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, the teachings of our sages, which to me offer profound lessons in action, focus, and mindfulness, and dedication to what is right. Rabbi Rami Shapiro describes this whole section of the Mishnah as a compendium of pithy, insightful, and engaging sayings on what matters in life and how to live it with dignity. The Mishnah, as Rabbi Berger noted at the first presentation, is the first layer of commentary on the Bible, especially the Torah, trying to codify the Torah. As you all know, there are supposed to be 613 commandments or mitzvot in the Torah, and it turns out we needed more instruction besides thou shalt or thou shalt not to actually implement them. The Mishnah was the ancient rabbis and sages' early attempt at making these mitzvot clear and doable. For centuries, there were people whose entire job was to memorize portions of these teachings and recite them when needed in teaching environments or legal environments. We weren't supposed to write them down, hence the term oral law. But around the end of the 2nd century CE, after we lost the Second Temple, Masada had fallen, the Bar Kokhba revolt was defeated, and the Romans were using their brute force on us, Judah Hanasi, Judah the prince, the head of the Jewish community, recognized that if we didn't write down these teachings, centuries of wisdom would be lost. So he gathered together some of his fellow sages, and they compiled this collection. The material spans about 5 centuries, from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when they returned from Babylonia to build the Second Temple, around 500-ish BCE, to Judah Hanasi's time, around 200 CE. The Mishnah opens with the discussion of, until what time may we say the Shema, which turns into a deep discussion of holy time, our place in the universe, the power of acknowledging God. It turned out that the Mishnah's instructions on how to enact each halakha, or law, or path, which is what halakha means, needed further explanation. And that's what later sages did in the Gemara. Together, the Mishnah and the Gemara comprise the Talmud. But Pirkei Avot is different from the rest of the Mishnah. Tucked away in the middle of the 4th section, or order, out of 6 orders, that deals with damages, that 4th section, what we would now call tort law, is this gem of 6 chapters. Its writers span a period from the 2nd century BCE to the 2nd century CE, and it collects the insights of 5 pairs, zugot, of scholars, the leaders of the Sanhedrin during that time, and 43 sages who came after them. The Sanhedrin was the 71-member council of Jewish sages. At the time of the creation of the Mishnah, Judah Hanasi was the president. And the final pair is probably familiar to most of you, Hillel and Shammai, who worked from the end of the 1st century BCE until around 30 CE. So through the teachings of these sages, we can understand how we Jews and anyone else who wants to acquire these teachings can learn how to be holy as God is holy. For Mussar study, rather than be concerned with the context of the ancient rabbis, all that stuff I just told you, its importance here is for each of us to be able to acquire the learning in a way that helps us strengthen our souls through refining and balancing our middot, or character traits. In this discussion, I'm going to look at some of the Mishnahot, plural of Mishnah, and while the whole collection is the Mishnah, each unit within a chapter is also called the Mishnah, just to keep us on our toes. So in this, we're going to look at these Mishnahot through a Mussar lens. In an hour, we couldn't hope to study all of the Mishnahot in this chapter, but I hope you'll be tempted enough to check the others out. We'll look at the middot, or character traits, the Mishnah calls forth. We'll look at potential cheshbon hanefesh, or accounting for the soul phrases that we can chant when we're working on a particular middot in the morning when we rise. And we'll look at possible kabbalot, or practices you can use to move the teachings into your soul, and questions that might spark your journaling. We'll look at the middot and the Mussar practice from the perspective of elevating our souls and of elevating our world. As our teacher, Rabbi David Jaffe, wrote in his book, Changing the World from the Inside Out, Rabbi Salanter is the father of the modern Mussar Institute in the movement, the modern Mussar movement in the 19th century. So Rabbi Salanter's key insight was that we can't just rely on our intellect to change ourselves, to align our behavior with our values. We must engage the heart and emotions. No matter how many times someone studies the verse, love your neighbor as yourself, one will not love one's neighbor more unless one feels in one's heart what it means to love oneself and one's neighbor. Just as our morning blessings, the Nisim B'Kol Yom, recognizing how great it is to be able to open our eyes and get out of bed and get dressed, as those operate on different and multiple levels, so does Mussar work. An example, let's just take the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim, which basically means, blessed is the Holy One, ruler of time and space, who frees the captive. On the level of the practical, how great that I can untangle myself from my covers. On the social justice level, I must help free the captive. On the soul level, may I uncover the way my soul is held captive and find release. So Mussar asks us to look at ourselves, to try to reach our higher selves. As Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian, 20th century master from Poland and Israel, reminds us, the goal of Mussar is to make the heart feel what the mind knows. And Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal from 18th century Italy, he opened his book, Path of the Just, reminding us that he wasn't telling us anything we didn't already know. So Mussar reminds us how to be in the world, in our relationships, in our community. And chapter 2 repeatedly brings these ideas and these multiple levels together. So I'm going to check out. I understand there's one question. If I knew how to find it, I'd be really happy. Oh, so there wasn't a question. So I'm just going to continue if nobody has anything. A story. I recently visited a patient who had broken her wrist and her hip in trying unsuccessfully to break a fall off a curb on her way from the Oakland Women's March to the San Francisco Women's March. It wasn't a life or death hospital stay by any means, but it still brought her in touch with the state of her soul. She's been an activist all her life for lesbian, gay issues, women's health, breast cancer advocacy. Her existential question to me was, how do I know if I'm doing enough? Or if instead I'm doing too much? As I was pondering her question, I realized that just that day, as I was preparing for this webinar, I recalled that Maimonides, the 12th century person of his millennium, urged us always to find the golden mean. He said, basically, proper conduct is the middle path between two extremes, each of which is unfavorable. One is excess and the other is restriction. So for example, restraint is the middle path between indulgence and the absence of desire. Similarly, generosity is the median between stinginess and extravagance. A person balances a character trait or middot by learning to align their behaviors with the golden mean. And this activist woman likely would have done better going to only one march that day. Chapter 2 starts with a teaching that makes me think Judah HaNasi was a Mussar master himself. And in our moment in American history and world events, it seems like this chapter offers us a guide to using Mussar to survive, work for the betterment of others, and live into our ethical practices. Next slide, please. Rabbi Omer, a zohi derek yeshara, sheyavor lo ha'adam. Rabbi Judah HaNasi said, what is the right path? One that honors both self and others. Be as mindful of small acts as great ones, for you cannot know the consequences of either. If you decide to act, weigh the cost to you against the benefit to others. And if you decide not to act, weigh the benefit to you against the cost to others. So if we seek the derek yeshara, the path of integrity or uprightness or ethics, we want to employ the midah of kavod or honor. We must honor ourselves and others. So thinking about kavod or honor, as Rabbi Rami Shapiro does, so next slide. Think of honor as honoring the senses, celebrating love, promoting reason, affirming diversity, and recognizing unity. How can we do this? By recognizing that small mitzvot can have just as much effect on our souls and on others as large mitzvot. So let me take a brief side trip to talk about mitzvot, the plural of mitzvah. Most of us were probably taught that the word in its original meaning was about being commanded to do something that God told us. We probably also know the common usage of doing a good deed. In Aramaic, the language spoken at the time of the Mishnah, mitzvah meant connection to God, to the divine, to the most holy. As Rabbi Bradley Artson says, next slide, please. Each deed either strengthens our connection to God or attenuates that link. There is no neutrality in the world of action. We either weave a web of goodness with each new action, adding a new strand to the fabric of our lives, or we snip away at the weave of righteousness that Judaism establishes in the world. In this second sense, mitzvah isn't just what you do because God said so. God isn't a cop, and mitzvot are not simply statutes. We do mitzvot because we seek to allow holiness into our lives. So when we speak of performing mitzvot, we are hopefully doing them with the intention of weaving that web of goodness, inviting holiness into our lives. Maimonides teaches that this is the exact moment when the golden mean is relevant. Exercise diligence in all that you do. He described minor mitzvot as rejoicing at festivals or learning Hebrew, while the greater ones were for him circumcision or wearing of tzitzit. So what might that mean for people who are not adherents to all the mitzvot? It means recognizing that doing small acts can be as important as doing great acts. An example, this week at our spiritual care team meeting, one of my colleagues told a story of providing a used coat to a homeless patient in the emergency department. As he helped the person into the coat, the recipient exclaimed, "It's such a warm coat, how wonderful." And then as they started adjusting the zipper, "And it's got a zipper, it's warm and it's got a zipper." As the chaplain zipped it for the person, he heard, "And it's got a hood, oh my, it's got a hood." The person's gratitude over such a small act of kindness overflowed in the department as people recognized what was happening. Several staff later told the chaplain that it had left them in tears. It was just a small thing, but it made such a difference to that person. You can also look at it as finding balance in your quest of small and large acts. And it could be, for example, choosing to make daily phone calls to your legislators, as opposed to organizing a trip to their local office, as opposed to becoming a leader in your community in the efforts to honor others and take care of the vulnerable. Because certainly, if part of the equation is honoring others as well as ourselves, then we have to think about what it means to honor others. In chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, we're going to read that Ben Zoma said, "Who is honored?" and replied, "The one who honors others." And later in this chapter, we read from Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, the great one. Next slide, please. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yehi kavod chaverach chaviv alecha keshelach. Rabbi Eliezer taught, "Let your friend's honor be as dear to you as your own." We know that we are required to honor everyone, whether they voted for a different presidential candidate than you did, or have different views from you, or a different religion, gender, ethnicity, whatever. We honor the people present in JCCs who have had to evacuate for bomb threats, and we honor the members of the mosque in Quebec whose sacred space was destroyed, along with the Jews who gave them keys to their synagogue while they rebuild. One of my teachers, Rabbi Mordechai Finley, teaches about us building a wall of virtue in which we honor others by shielding them, especially our loved ones, from our complaining, condemning, and criticizing, and from any hot anger we might have been inclined to spew at them through habit. When asked what we do when we're met by others who spew the hot anger or condemnation at us, he teaches that we must still remain behind our wall of virtue, and eventually the others will join us. So Alan and Avi Fertig taught me this story. They thought it was about stinginess. That's when they taught it to us. But I really think it's also about honor. It's probably about all sorts of things. So once upon a time, a rabbi came to a new town and saw a desperate need for a new mikveh. And so he undertook to build it. The first step, of course, was fundraising. And because he was new to town, he asked others to suggest who might donate to the project. Excuse me. When a list of names was put together, he asked, "Is there anyone else who has been blessed with resources?" Yes, they answered. There was one other person, but he's a hard-hearted miser and will never donate. "Let me see what I can do," said the rabbi. So the rabbi went to the miser's house and knocked on the door. The man came to the door, saw that it was a rabbi, and barked gruffly, "Whatever you want, I won't give it to you." "I don't want anything," responded the rabbi. "I actually came to see if there's anything for which you want a blessing. Can I give you a blessing for anything?" "As a matter of fact," said the miser, "there is something I want. Can you give me a blessing that my wife should die?" The rabbi was taken aback. "That I can't do," he said. "Blessings can be only for the good." "But why would you want such a thing anyway?" he asked. "Nothing but nagging and fighting, harsh words and nasty deeds. It is so miserable to have her around that I just wish she were dead," complained the man. The rabbi thought quickly. "Well, I can't offer a blessing for that to happen, but there just might be something I can do. We are taught in the midrash that if a person begins to undertake a mitzvah and then fails to complete it, he will be punished by having his wife and children die. I hate to advise you in this direction, but it could work for you. You could vow to do something, then not fulfill the vow, and expect the punishment to fall on your wife." "That sounds wonderful," said the miser. "Just what I need." Then he thought for a moment. "But what could I vow?" The rabbi offered a helpful suggestion. "You could vow to fund the new mikveh we're building in town, and then you simply don't fulfill that vow. That should do it." Without a second's hesitation, the miser proclaimed, "I vow to fund the entire cost of building the new mikveh in town, and I won't give a cent," he exclaimed. "Very well," said the rabbi, and he departed. A couple weeks later, the rabbi dropped in on the miser and asked how it was going. "Nothing's happened," the man replied. "It isn't working." Pondered the rabbi. "I wonder why that is. Let me ask you, when your wife has insulted you, have you ever responded by insulting her back by an open window or door so someone passing might have heard?" "I might have done that," said the miser. "What difference should that have made?" "Well," said the rabbi, "we're taught that someone who insults another person in public, it is as if they killed that person. So if you did that, it means that you have effectively executed the retribution on your wife. She is technically already dead. So if you want the real punishment to befall her, you have to respond to her differently. If she insults you, respond to her patiently and kindly. If she tells you that you are a bore and she hates you, thank her for the kindness. Repay her every harsh word with a kindness or even a gift. Do that, and you are sure to have your wish fulfilled." A couple weeks later, the rabbi again dropped in on the miser to ask how it was going. This time, the miser was white as a sheet and shaking so badly he couldn't answer. "What's wrong?" asked the rabbi. "What happened?" "I want my vow annulled," cried the miser. "How can I cancel my vow?" "That's not possible," answered the rabbi. "One vow has been sworn. It stands in the heavenly court. But why the change of heart?" "I need that vow annulled," cried the miser. "I followed your advice. Whenever my wife called me a name, I smiled sweetly at her. If she told me she hated something I did, I thanked her for the feedback. When she yelled at me, I responded softly and kindly. At first, she didn't notice a change and just kept heaping insults and hatred on me as usual. But then one time, she called me some rude name, and I responded by calling her dear. And she stopped and just stared at me. And then she called me another name, and I responded by calling her darling. Again, she stopped and just stared at me. Soon she stopped with the insults and harsh words. I kept on calling her dear and darling, and after a little while, she actually called me dear. Soon it was dear me and dear you, darling me and darling you. Now we're so in love, you have to help me annul that vow. Don't let her be taken from me. I love her so. The vow surely can't be annulled, said the rabbi. Oh no, cried the man. Said the rabbi, there may be another kind of how you did if you fail to fulfill your vow. Now, if you happen to fulfill the vow you made, then there won't be any sort of punishment. Would you consider fulfilling your vow? Yes, yes, said the former officer. How much can I give you? Wait here, I'll get the keys to my treasury. The man ran off and the rabbi smiled. The change came about because the miser, albeit unknowingly, created a wall of virtue and became full of chesed, kindness, and controlled his anger. He used chesed and kavod, honor, to resolve his conflict with his wife, and now they were in love again. It's amazing what a little kindness can do. So we can use the middot of honor to get along with our families, maybe, if we use it, and our friends, and maybe even our Facebook friends. I have two family members on each end of the political spectrum. One was a Bernie bro and the other very far to the right. And both of them trolled people on Facebook. I finally, in a private message so as not to shame him, politely asked the Bernie bro to stop responding with such language, and he did. The other continued unabated until I went through an entire Facebook discussion and replied each time he was vilely disrespectful and suggested that he might be more effective if he used different words. He could fake it if he couldn't feel it, which is a Mussar concept after all. If we take on the trait, whether we feel it yet in our bones, we can eventually become so accustomed that it does become second nature and find a way to burrow into our bones. So next slide, please. So possible phrases that come from these verses: the right path honors both others and myself. My friend's honor is as dear as my own. And a potential Kabbalah or practice is basically to build your wall of virtue, to be like the miser and repay everything negative toward you with kindness and not condemn, criticize, or complain. But only do that if it's safe. The other way we're supposed to be on the derech yeshara, the path of integrity, is by being mindful of the costs and benefits of our actions or inactions, both on ourselves and on others. If the benefit to others is more than the cost to you, then do it. If the benefit to you outweighs the cost to others, it might be time to rethink it. This goes back to honoring yourself and others, because if we don't do at least some self-care, then we can't really help others. But if we're all about what's convenient for us, then we have some Mussar work to do. Generosity is another midah that can help with honor. Think of how much you can give to someone to help them out and how much it really costs you to help that person versus what it would mean to them. I'm going to have that story of the person with their worn, used coat in my head for a long time. Next slide. So other possible phrases: be as mindful about small acts as I am about big ones. And a potential Kabbalah, and certainly this would be great for journaling, is when you're considering doing something that could help someone else, really stop to consider the cost and benefits. Is it, do I have the time to do it? Do I really not have the time? Am I really too busy? Or could I do it? What kind of effect will it have on the other person? Or when you're journaling, what did I do that would help or not help? Like, really think about it. So I was going to stop and ask if there are any questions before we go on. And I don't see any new questions, so I'm going to continue unless someone wants to write something. Okay, so next slide. Hu haya omer, oseh ratzono kirtzonecha, kidei sheya'aseh ratzoncha kirtzono. He says, align your will with God's will, and God's will become your will. Surrender your will to God's will, and God will surrender others' will to your will. I have to confess, this was really confusing to me when I first read it. And so great. So the next slide, please. I love Rabbi Rami Shapiro's note on this Mishnah. Next. Can we get the next slide? I'm hoping, yeah, great. God's will is reality, the way things are at this very moment. Aligning with God's will means working with what is rather than what you wish things to be. Surrendering your will to God's will means acting in accord with reality. If you do, others will follow suit and you will be of one mind. No alternative facts, no untruths, no broken promises or living in a bubble. Reality of what is. So I have two examples of this, and I should probably have a couple more. So how many of you know someone who's in needed hearing aids but refused to acknowledge it? Now, I've been wearing hearing aids since I was 20, so I think I'm legitimately able to do this one. And have you spent years trying to get them to accept that they can't hear? My daughter and I spent at least 2 years trying to get my beloved husband to have his hearing tested. I even went with him to the doctor, who reminded him that the year before, the doctor had suggested that my husband and we would benefit from his getting them. First, you have to accept the reality before you can move forward. You have to really understand you're hearing impaired to think you need aids. The other example is less humorous, although that one isn't necessarily. I counsel a young woman who has been in a typical abusive relationship off and on for years. Recently, she not only broke it off after he spewed soul-crushing verbal abuse at her, but she changed her phone number. And only this week, she gave him her new phone number. Tried not to be too disappointed. She mentioned to me, I wish my parents wouldn't be so disapproving about what he's done. I responded, do you want your parents to be accepting of someone who abuses you? No, she replied. She just wishes it could be different. She hasn't yet come to accept that this person is not about to change, in part because he won't do anything to change, because after all, she always goes back. And until she accepts the reality, God's will, she won't be able to see other healthier possibilities, like a man who might treat her with respect. Next slide, please. Hillel Omer, Al tifros min hatzibor, va'al ta'amen ve'atzmach ad yom motach, va'al tadin et chaverach ad shetagia limkomo. Hillel teaches, do not abandon community. Do not be certain of yourself until you die. Do not judge others until standing in their place. This Mishnah brings into focus so many middot: judgment and open-heartedness, humility, persistence, and enthusiasm. We all know that being in community is the way to our own personal well-being. Study after study shows that people who are connected with friends, with their religious community, with their neighbors, are healthier, happier, and live longer lives. Jews are particularly made for community. We need the minyan of 10 for certain prayers. When we move to new places, we build community services, mikvahs, hospitals, and so on as fast as possible. We help mourners on their first steps on their mourning journey through Shiva Minyans, gatherings of community. And in our time now, we need to remember that we are stronger in community. We don't have the luxury of turning our backs on the vulnerable. In terms of certainty, our desire for certainty is so powerful that we will accept almost any delusion. This verse strongly suggests humility. Don't be so sure of your own place, your own position, until you questioned your own motives, questioned your sources. Use some skepticism about yourself and what or whom you trust. And even then, think about what you're blinding yourself to. So in order to walk the Derek Yeshara, the path of integrity, we need to strengthen our humility, recognize whether we're fooling ourselves or others, and when we need to strengthen our own commitment to emet, to truth. And then do not judge others until you stand in their place. When we are working on the midah of shifut, judgment, we can certainly use this as a cheshbon hanefesh phrase. Ba'al tadin et chaverach ad she'tagia limkomo. Do not judge others until you stand in their place. Or as Harper Lee wrote in To Kill a Mockingbird, you really never know a man until you understand things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. I was going to ask if there are any questions, but I see still none. So hopefully you're all really understanding this. So I'm going to skip ahead now to Mishnah 2:9. Thank you. Omar lahem, ze'u ur'u is a zohi derek yishara sheyidbak ba ha'adam. Rabban ben Zachai said to his disciples, look and see what is the key to right action. Rabbi Eliezer said, a good eye. Rabbi Yehoshua, a good friend. Rabbi Yossi, a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon, a good mind. Rabbi Elazar, a good heart. Rabban Yochanan ben Zachai said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar ben Arach, for his words include your words. Better than a good eye that sees through delusion to truth. Better than a good friend who can challenge you to be your best, or a good neighbor who honors you and yours. Better than a good mind that weighs the consequences of an act before doing that act. Better than all that is a lev tov, a good heart that desires only what is right and true for both yourself and others. Another way of looking at this comes from Maimonides, who taught that a good eye means that you're content with what you have. The contentment he saw, I'm sorry, my phone just rang in my ear. And my phone's in another room, so I thought I had taken care of all that. So Maimonides saw this good eye as having a contentment that was an important ethical quality, that you're satisfied with your lot without needing to be jealous of someone who has more. But that's not as important, according to Rabbi Yochanan, as having a good heart, because once you have that, all the rest are included. And now we skip to the last two Mishnayot in this chapter, arguably the best known. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Hayom Katser, V'hamalcha Merubah. Rabbi Tarfon teaches the day is short, the task is great, the workers are lazy, the stakes are high, the master is demanding. For me, this is an example of what makes Pirkei Avot so inspiring. As almost nothing else does, this is a beautiful description of our spiritual quest to find the right path. The day is short. As Rabbi Rami teaches us, we have only this moment. The task is great. The journey toward our best, highest selves, our authentic selves, will take our lifetime. The workers are lazy. Our yetzer hara, our evil inclination, our desire not to improve ourselves can drag us down. The challenges our own emotions and lower self put in our way can be enormous. The stakes are high. Our very existence, the existence and health of our planet and the people on it may depend on our individual efforts. The master is demanding. God, Hashem, the Holy One of Blessing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, expects nothing less of us than total commitment. Another way of looking at this is brought to mind in the times we live. There are so many things to do to perfect our union, as so many Jewish values are under attack in terms of caring for the widow, orphan, and stranger, those most vulnerable. So the time is short to protect people. There is so much to do. We may not be lazy, but when you consider how few Americans vote, it's amazing to me. That seems the quintessence, actually, of a certain laziness of spirit and of energy. And now the stakes for the vulnerable, our country, our democracy, and our planet are very high. And humanity and the universe are waiting to see if we can avoid war, nuclear war. This particular Mishnah could easily become a phrase or a chant with its words altered only slightly whenever you're dealing with zerizut, enthusiasm or persistence, tzedek, justice, decisiveness, humility, anava. Really, this one could cover almost anything because the task of change will be great and we are often lazy, succumbing to our Yetzer Hara's desire for complacency. And that too is what Mussar is about, giving us the tools to implement the hard work of perfecting our souls, making us better able to serve what is good in this world. It's important to note that most traditional commentators take a more narrow approach to the task. For them, the task is Torah study. And for me, Torah encompasses so much more than sitting down and studying the Chumash, the 5 books, or even bringing in the commentaries in the Talmud. It is about how we live the Torah as well. And so we conclude with the last Mishnah in this chapter, and probably its most famous, the one that's on the screen now. Hu haya omer lo alecha hamalacha likmor, v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena. Rabbi Tofon also says, you are not obligated to complete the task, nor are you free to abandon it. I think this is probably one of the most quoted Jewish texts. It too is traditionally assumed to refer to Torah study. But I think it's safe to say that the Derech Yishara, the ethical path, is about much more than Torah study. As we learned that a good heart encompasses a good eye, a neighbor, a mind, so does the study of Torah encompass so much more. As we read in our morning service, the Shachrit service, Torah study encompasses acts of loving kindness, welcoming the stranger, celebrating with bride and groom, making peace where there is strife, and so on. So we can look at this Mishnah as the description of our spiritual quest, that we won't ever finish it, but we have to be on the journey. Or we can look at it as a description of work to perfect the world. Slavery did not end overnight, and neither will we perfect our union in the next 4 years. But that doesn't mean we have leave to abandon our efforts in that direction. This chapter has offered us a number of ways of looking at middot, as I have focused mainly on honor and humility and enthusiasm or persistence, but others as well. We can use these pithy, inspiring teachings as phrases that help embed their lessons into our souls and build kabbalot or practices that will support our spiritual work and ask ourselves questions in our journaling. On this last slide please, is a summary of the middot and the phrases that can work with them. So honor or kavod, the right path honors both others and myself, and my friend's honor is as dear as my own. For humility or anava, do not be certain of yourself until you die. Truth or emet, if you decide to act, weigh the cost to yourself against the benefit to others, and if you decide not to act, weigh the benefit to you against the cost to others. For enthusiasm or zerizut, the day is short, the task is great, the workers are lazy, the stakes are high, the master is demanding. For judgment or shifut, do not judge someone until you've stood in their place. For loving kindness or chesed, the key to right action is a good heart. For justice or tzedek, this is one I didn't cover because I didn't think I was going to have time, because I'm supposed to be done pretty shortly, is in a place where there is no human being, be the human being. persistence or netzach. You are not obligated to complete the task, but nor are you free to abandon it. So I'm grateful to the Mussar Institute for giving me this opportunity to be with you all, and for offering me opportunities for growth, and to all of you for your participation and attention. May we use these texts to deepen our practice as we strive to find our derech yeshara, our path of integrity. Ken yehi ratzon, may it be your will. So I see that there's one more question, which was, which version of Pirkei Avot is this that you like, the English? Most of it is actually from Shapiro's version. I used some from just my own translating what the words mean, and from Carrie Olitsky's book. Anything else?
If there are any other questions, you can put them in the Q&A portion. Well, I'm not sure we have any here. Anyone else? See, Marian Inav raised her hand. Marian, if you're available and you'd like to provide a question, please put it in the Q&A box. But I don't see one yet. All right. Well, in that case, if there are no... here we go, Jeff. Is it possible to get the slides? This entire presentation is being recorded. It will be available. You'll get a notification where it can be found.
Is it possible to get the slides? Someone
It is possible. We'll make them available if it's okay with you, Rabbi.
Probably okay with me.
Okay, and we'll make sure that they're available as well, and an email will go out.
So Richard, feel free to ask questions, and thank you.
Yes, Annette Hom has a question.
So in a place where there's no human being, B1, can you speak briefly to that as per our troubled times? I was really worried that I was going to run out of time, and I wanted to be sure I got to the last ones. And so really, this one to me is so much about I agree with you that we live in a time when we're not sure people are really being human. And so it's about being able to stand up, to not stand idly by the blood of our neighbors, and to speak up, and to be the kind person, the humble person, but the person who keeps kindly trying to lead people in the right direction. And I'm sure we all have examples of where you feel like there's no one being the mensch there. That's another way it's sometimes translated. And it's up to us to recognize that no matter what is going on, we need our wall of virtue, and we need to be the ones who say what's right, but do it in a way that people can hear. You know, when you think about it, that wall of virtue is something that's, if we don't, no one's going to hear us if we complain with them or condemn them or anything. If we just sort of remind them to go to their higher selves themselves, to, did you really mean to be that disrespectful? I don't really like that language or whatever. And to just sort of ask questions or listen compassionately without necessarily having to answer. So Lisa doesn't like the metaphor wall. Okay, so let's go back. So someone asked, I didn't get the message about abuse. So the message about abuse was that if the reality is that the person is never going to change, until the abuser is never going to change, until the abused person understands that that's the reality, she's going to keep going back and keep hoping that it's going to change. And it's like she has to be able to accept God's will in this case, or accept the reality that it's, how many times do you need to have it happen before you recognize it's the definition of insanity is that you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And so that was that message that until the young woman is able, because she's not there yet, to see that he's not going to change, then she's going to keep going back because she hasn't accepted reality. And I hope that became more clear. Has there been any other metaphor used rather than wall? So that's what my teacher's been giving me over the last few weeks. And I just think about it as having, I mean, the other way is just recognizing no matter what comes my way, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to not condemn or complain. And I'm going to be working on the middot that has to do with anger and stop and be able to stop myself, to put that space between the match and the fuse that Alan speaks about so eloquently. So someone asked regarding honor, how does one inspire healing in a community setting? I'm thinking of divisions with our small Jewish community. So I think that I'm pretty sure it's someplace else in Pirkei Avot. No, it's actually in the Talmud. The whole discussion between Shammai and Hillel, and that ends up being Elu ve'elu, Devarim of the living, the words of the living God, and really being able to sit and listen to each other in a way where, because the reason it went Hillel's way instead of Shammai's way wasn't ever necessarily because Hillel's content was better. It was because the house of Hillel was more respectful and was able to actually list what Shammai's arguments were first. And so really, to do it in a community setting, you all have to really commit to being able to listen and speak politely to each other and be generous. Okay. I'm losing track of the questions here regarding on. Okay, we got that one. So in seeking balance, learning how to accept reality and move from anger to compassion to be better able to stand. Yeah, I think you got it, Annette, pretty much. Is fence, like one learned in chapter 1, better? Okay, better for the questioner than wall. You decide that. Oh, I have to tell you, I didn't even think about wall in that particular, in that context. Isn't that bizarre? I totally hear you. I think it's actually just that you have a force field, that you recognize that you have to not spew at other people. So how about force field? Fence to me, well, makes good neighbors. You could go that way. So Richard asked a great question. 218 advises do not pray from rote. And all of these questions have been great questions. I'm just, do you have any advice as to how to pray with intent or kavanah rather than by rote? So I'm going to tell a little brief story with that. So I was a member of a congregation for years that used the Union Prayer Book. And while they were waiting for the Gates of Grace to come out and then finally Mishkan Tefillah, we actually had, we had a minhag or a custom that every time you came up with Lord or He, you had to redo it. So you would get to blessed is the Lord and go, blessed is God, blessed is the eternal. And it was really a wonderful exercise in learning how to pray with kavanah. Like, so who am I talking to? Who am I praying to? So it may be that if you want to do it, so part one opportunity is just look at different translations or look at what the prayer means to you and just settle on that for a little while. Your prayers, yes, we have this incredibly wonderful set liturgy, but take parts of it and see if you can have it really speak to you. Pick a phrase and chant it. And Shefa Gold has so many different phrases that you can use for something like that, and play with it. And do it in English if that'll help you be able to play better. Or pick a melody that really works for you. the other way of making it more kavanah is also what kind of choreography can you add, and not to be showy or anything, but just like, so what is, because it's about embodying it. And what we have done at a religious school I used to work at was we had the kids actually take the V'ahavta apart and embody it, and as a way to get them to maybe understand what b'shochrecha u'b'kumecha, when you lie down and when you rise up, means. And I actually still use it sometimes as a way to not, because, you know, when I'm going to bed and I'm saying it really quickly, no, let's stop, let's figure out what those, how to embody those words. I hope that answers your question. Okay, thinking this is the veil, one can see through it, and it's a choice. I don't, at least I don't know what you're, what that's in reference to. So I think I've answered everything that's there. So it says we're going to move away from wall right there to force field or fence. I feel very over. So Kina, if I'm sorry, it was overwhelming. I hope you'll maybe listen to it again. But the other way to begin on this path realistically is to take a class from the Mussar Institute, and find a Mussar buddy and start working your way through everyday holiness. It's you know, just take that tiny little step. But if you don't own Everyday Holiness, buy it and start reading it. It was an amazing thing for me when I did that. So I really encourage you to do that. And
it's time to end things. Thank you so much, Rabbi Cahn, for a very engaging presentation and a very lively Q&A session. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Mussar Institute, and to remind everyone that this has been a recorded event and it will be available for your reviewing. And as a final reminder, to remind everyone that the Jewish Spirituality Challenge is coming up Sunday, March 19th. So please investigate and please consider participating. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for the active participation in today's meeting. Thanks so much, and we will end today's show. Thanks again, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Thank you. I can leave the meeting?
You can leave, but we'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay.